show. We'll be taking you through the day's 10-game slate, any late-breaking news, all the important ways that you need to build your lineups today. When you have this many options in front of you, I'm Chris Spags, joined today by one of the premier analysts in this little daily fantasy sports industry of ours, Mr. Fast Eddie Fair. How you doing, Eddie?
I'm doing well. How are you, Chris?
I'm good. I got a little headache tip from Eddie because I kind of got a headache that kicked in. He told me to drink some carbonation. So anybody else out there suffering from a headache, mix some carbonation into your life because the bottomless well of information that is Fast Eddie Fear says that that's the path to redemption for all of our throbbing brains.
Yeah, and there's definitely a chance that that's accurate, and I'm not just screwing with you.
So. there's at least a slight chance. We are presented, by the way, by Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is, of course, the premier app where players draft a lineup built of prop bets of only top-tier athletes. You pick 10 props out of the 20. The less probable a prop is to occur, the more points it's worth, and that's where the game theory comes in. So go to the bit.ly link I'm going to drop in the YouTube chat. It's bit.ly/Awesemo. You get $10 on any $10 deposit, $20 on any $100 deposit, and $50 on $200 or more. You get that money right away. You don't have to wait around for it. Just play it, and then it's all yours. So go ahead, sign up now. Eddie, we got a guy in the first game coming up who is probably worth talking about. Donovan Mitchell, his over-under is at 20.5 points. Slight shading for the under. Which of that would you go with for Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, you would have liked to have seen Rubio out, and then you could slam the over on that. With Rubio in, I'll still stick with the under. It's a close one, but obviously the pace of the Cavs is molasses-like. So going to be a real shitty game of, or at least the post-lot game of Daddy Like will be terrible, as we have literally only the Cavs and the Jazz at tip. So not a whole lot to love there, but yeah, it would have been nice. And if you are playing on Thrive, which unfortunately I am apparently still ineligible to do, definitely monitoring whenever you have something that is injury dependent certainly creates a spot where you can take advantage. So in the event that Rubio had been out, yeah, I'd have been a huge fan of getting Donovan with the over there. But in this situation, I will take the under.
Yeah, I've still got Mitchell projected for 23 points. I think the matchup is cozy enough. I think the real risk is that they just blow him out the door, and there's, I think, a possibility of that. So I'll differentiate anyway. I'll take the over and the easier points. But I think going for a little more points on the under might make sense. And you can go put that prop bet in right now at Thrive Fantasy. Again, use that promo code Awesemo. Get all of the deposit bonuses I mentioned above. Support Thrive. They support this show. And that's what helps us keep the lights on and helps keep us
how often do they go really, really off the board at Thrive? I'm curious, again, not being intimately familiar with the product, and put up some real game theory ones where it's like, I don't know, Giannis Antetokounmpo, 14.5 points or more, the over pays 50 and the under pays 375 or something. Like, I'm curious how frequently they ever throw out an option where one side is well more likely to occur, just as a differentiating spot, but it's far less incentivized.
I think the first time we had that Awesemo tournament when I played, I didn't see any that were that egregious. But today, there actually seemed to be a couple. There's one for Karl-Anthony Towns where the over is 75 points and the under is 125 points for 11.5 rebounds, which makes sense, I guess, because obviously Towns is smashing everything. Yeah, I guess they do a little bit of it. So anyway, that's for your edification. Oh, no pun intended. God. Sorry, edification was not a wow.
No, that worked well.
We are going to the premium Slack, by the way, for questions throughout the show, of course. So make sure to join us at awesemo.com now. Use the promo code live before lock while you still have some time, and go there. You'll get priority for all your questions being answered. But Eddie, take me through the main items on the slate that you feel like people need to know. Where are you going when you're building a lineup tonight as you're building blocks?
As we so the lack of confident value that we really like tonight really skews construction a lot in other ways. Like, it's difficult to play Giannis most notably, but even guys when you're talking about Westbrook or Paul George, due to the difficulty in coming up with acceptable value. Again, I tinker with DraftKings, a FanDuel, and these days a Yahoo lineup all day leading up to lock. And I have the most concentrated, I'm going to punt this guy lineup I've ever had on FanDuel, where I have Chandler Hutchinson in there at small forward and no one else under $5,600 in the entire lineup. It's incredibly balanced with him in there because all the other value, there's some upside value. There's some guys I think are interesting, in the $4,000 range where they could certainly come to pass, but not a lot of it that feels chalky, and there are a lot of mid-price guys I think do carry a lot of upside. A number of guys, a couple of Knicks, who are just priced a little too well on FanDuel. So I have the most, yes, I'm gonna punt this dude lineup I think I've ever built on FanDuel today. Where again, it's Chandler at the minimum, and then no one leading all the way up to again 5,600, and then everyone hanging out in that 56 to a little over 8K range, I think. So yeah, Chandler Hutchinson is not terribly good at basketball. I do think a lot of the people I've listened to opine on the Bulls today are speaking with certitude a little bit about things that we don't necessarily know are going to be the case. And that includes, so they have come out and said that he is going to start. So that clears up Miles Turner is in and starting, which is what we expected because he practiced yesterday, but he's one of my favorite tournament plays of the day. He's not cheap, but this is a massive spot for Miles Turner, and you're going to get him at single-digit ownership. So since that news just happened to break in front of my eyes as I was looking at it, I'll interrupt to mention that. This is a team that can run various guys out on the wings and run pretty small if necessary, and has some smaller guys who are decent wing defenders and are in a matchup where you don't need huge amounts of size out at the 2 and the 3. So I don't want to spend more time talking about a game that isn't terribly appealing than I have to, but that's just to say that you can get a lot of time with Shaq Harrison at the 2 and the 3, and you can get a lot of time with Ryan Arcidiacono at the 2 playing next to Chris Dunn. So I'm not even sure we get the 36 minutes of Chandler Hutchinson a lot of people seem to be taking as a granted, especially now that we have Bobby Portis out as well. So I don't mind Chandler Hutchinson on FanDuel at 3,500. I don't hate him on DraftKings where he's the absolute flat minimum, but he is a thoroughly non-productive fantasy basketball player going up against one of the top few defenses in the league right now. So certainly expectations should be tempered, and he would be way, way down my list of $10 dudes on Yahoo I would want to play. So there's a song and dance on him. I like Miles Turner as quite a bit now. There's a ton of centers I like today. I think almost anyone looking at today's slate can see a lot of centers with potential upside, but I expect his ownership to be well less than that of, say, Hassan Whiteside, and I just feel that there's a different type of uncertainty where Whiteside we're always worried about the minutes, and I do think, believe it or not, a blowout is in play in that game. That's how bad this Washington team has profiled to be. But I think Miles Turner has a massive upside here. I mean, he does have a massive upside here. This is a Chicago team that hemorrhages points at center. And he has a 55 or 60 point game against them already this year. They've played twice already this year. Again, the personnel have varied a lot between those games and this one. You had LaVine out for one and in for one due to his issues. You had Oladipo out for one and in for one due to his issues. I think you had Miles Turner only in for one as well. You may have played them both. I actually don't remember offhand, but I know in at least one of them he put up some 50-odd number and smashed the shit out of Wendell Carter, which would be what you'd expect to see. So obviously there's some uncertainty with potential blowout. Certainly wouldn't shock you in this game. Busted his nose really solidly and is wearing a mask, which can obviously be disturbing, but I would be a little happier going with him at 5% ownership than Whiteside at 18 or 20.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Turner has had 2 big games versus Chicago this year, like you mentioned, both of which he exceeded value. Last game was 49.25 fantasy points in 34 minutes. And a game with a low total, too, just 96 to 90. Yeah,
I might add both those games, again, I don't have it up in front of me, but I recall them being competitive. It's like a 2-point game and a 6-point game. I think it's about the numbers on this. So they ended up being, and this game is in Chicago, so my concerns for a blowout are to some degree mollified. I like Marc Gasol a fair amount. Again, if ownership stand where we think they might, I kind of like playing Marc Gasol a little more than playing Hassan Whiteside. Obviously, you're spending a significant amount more money, and we shouldn't game log watch too much in this one because I do believe the last game between the Grizzlies and the Nets was their double overtime affair, so everything in that game was significantly inflated, but especially on Yahoo. I talked with a couple people for a good hour earlier today about Yahoo construction, and I was like, okay, well, where'd you start today? And he's like, well, the first guy I put in was Karl Anthony Towns. And I consider that staggeringly incorrect when there isn't as much amazing value. If there were, it changes day to day. There are days on Yahoo where there are literally 8 players who cost the minimum, which is a very low minimum, which is a pretty important difference to note, that there's 8 minimum price guys we expect to score 30 plus. And so that changes everything because you're just like, okay, grab a few of them and then just stack in your high-scoring guys on the day. But today, where the value is not that exceptional and there's not really any great $10 guys, and the best decent guys are like KCP at 12, which really doesn't make your socks roll up and down. Dennis Smith is still 11. Matchup isn't great, but I can certainly see the cost there is really the guard spot. There's a lot of great guards who are priced well. But you have Karl Anthony Towns is 49. Marc Gasol's 29. Whiteside is 25. Miles Turner's 30. Gobert's 33. Like that's a lot of cheddar to throw starting at that guy. So most days I do think that would be a decent impulse. And again, it's one of the reasons I don't think you should ever have too set of a procedure. You need to be able to keep your head on a swivel and pivot based on the exact situation. But yeah, most days I think 8 out of 10 days on Yahoo windmilling in Towns would have been the right play. But today I think it's pretty incorrect. I don't even know where to go. There's a lot of guys to talk about. Give me questions. Give me games. Give me things.
Make sure to drop those actual questions, not just either or questions in the premium Slack, and we will get to those right away. I guess let's talk about some of the higher ownership guys. And you mentioned Karl Anthony Towns. What are we doing with Towns tonight? He's pretty highly priced. He's also projected to be the highest owned guy on the slate. But looks good. Obviously, the usage has been there in spades since Teague and Rose went out. Now Covington's out with Teague coming back. How are you feeling about the prospects of the T-Wolves?
Yeah, this all becomes ownership relative. It's a similar situation to Harden yesterday in that you can name a couple ways in which Towns doesn't look good today. This is a Magic team that has been a lot more resilient against centers recently, both due to the system implemented by Clifford and individual improvements by Vooch. But that's sort of like saying, Harden has a generally negative matchup against the Warriors versus his history. The largest overwhelming factor is that you still do have a much more controlling Towns who contributes in a lot of ways. But I do think the return of Teague certainly to start and potentially Rose limits the amount of damage that we can expect him to necessarily do in this spot. It isn't a team that has given up as much on the inside as other teams, as much to centers, so maybe it is a spot in which you do see a little more flex out of Wiggins. Teague being back himself just changes the way the offense is run and doesn't run through Towns as much. So I don't have an issue with anyone playing Karl Anthony Towns, but at a really significant, close to or at 5-digit price, I'd be more inclined in my first lineup to take shots at other guys who I think possess similar upside and are priced in the 6-7K range. There are a number of them. I don't totally hate Thomas Bryant even in what's not the best matchup, but still 6,000 on DK is certainly attractive price. Vooch himself across the ball, certainly not guaranteed, but has had several upside games against Towns and had several upside games this year against very difficult opponents. So I have him projected exactly 2.5 points less than Towns, and if you're going to have Vooch at 8% and Towns at 20, I would rather play Vooch. Again, Gasol we've already mentioned a couple times. I don't think I want to go back to Nurkic. You have to imagine he's got some popularity swell because of his absolutely preposterous 20-25 by 5 insert numbers here game. But Gobert, a little bit more of a cashy play, but certainly that makes sense. DeAndre Ayton has looked great after kind of taking a month off and seeing more of Rashawn Holmes on the court than I think he would have liked. Has really returned to form. The matchup with the Clips I like a lot. If you're looking bargain hunting there, I think Boban makes at least a fair amount of sense to consider. And have sort of a late swap plan there. He started both games against Phoenix this year, and one of them he had about 20 fantasy points in 16 minutes, and the other one he had about 30 in 19 minutes. He would be pretty easily the best value play on the day in the event he got the start. Again, it's tricky because we're not going to know until pretty close to late, and he's using a really valuable center spot, but it's nice to have a Boban plan, and by that I just mean everyone who's played DFS for any extensive period of time has ended up in the situation where it's like, oh crap, this happened and I didn't get enough of this guy in or enough of this guy out, or I didn't pivot ideally. Well, that's something you should practice. You should fire drill that shit. Like, you're sitting there now listening to my dumbass. You have a second. Imagine that you just got news and it's, I'm trying to remember what time that game is. I want to say 9 o'clock for that game. I'll double check. That game is a 9 o'clock game, so Eastern. So it's 8:57 and you get news that Boban is playing. What are your spots? Like, know that already. They'll be quicker to do if you're figuring them out now as opposed to at 8:57. So have a Boban plan because it would allow you to stack some extra value in there, should that have come to pass.
Also getting some questions about your thoughts about Giannis. I think that's actually an interesting play, especially if you were loading up on Hawks. The Hawks guys intrigue me. One guy who jumped out to me, Kevin Huerter, just shooting a lot, but the shot hasn't fallen, and the Bucks are going to give him open threes, or at least looks at threes. I'm intrigued by Giannis, and I forced some in there, though he didn't project super well for me. How are you feeling about Giannis and, I guess, this matchup with the Hawks?
Yeah, obviously there's a tale of two games here. We have seen the Hawks put forward some, very useful, contests where they stay competitive and the minutes don't get spread all over the place, and we're still dealing with, no Bazemore, no Taurean Prince. Miles Plumlee is out as well, so you can hope for a slightly denser minutes concentration between these guys. I do think it's a game that I'm inclined to be sort of all in on or way the hell away from. Talking about some of the individual prices, Trae Young at $5,900 on DraftKings, I do like a lot. Obviously, all sorts of frenetic output, not the greatest matchup in the world, but the pace is through the roof here. One of the faster games of the day, and $5,900 is just a little bit too cheap. Like, he doesn't even need to play particularly well to not kill you at that price. And that's just a number that has come down to a much more tolerable price for me there. Huerter, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with this rotation once they get all these other wings back and healthy, but they're really making a time commitment to him. It's just that the price has come up to the point where he's not super upside guy. Like, he's getting me, 18 to 27 most nights. How often is he going to get me 40 where he's in, like, my GPP winning lineup? So, like, if he's still 4,000, yeah, it'd be, like, my favorite value play in the day. FanDuel, he's 5. DK is 4.6. I can certainly see having some exposure to him. But, your concern with the blowout makes him difficult in cash, and in tournaments, you want guys who carry a big upside, and that's a rarity out of him, and he still ends up chopping up minutes with all the other wings that they haven't played with now. Daniel Hamilton starting usually next to him, but Bembry backing up both those spots, and Lynn coming in. So, concerned. I wouldn't be overly inclined towards Huerter, but it's probably a guy I'd have a share or two of if I was building 150. Collins makes sense for me in both cash and tournaments at the DK price at least. On FanDuel, I'm probably looking other ways, but pretty certain he's going to get you your double-double. Productive enough that you think that floor is there, that he makes a fair amount of sense in cash. I probably prefer Tobias Harris, who I think was a little undersold tonight in a matchup I really like. Both him and Gallo have been at least marginally to incredibly successful in the two previous pairings against the Suns team this year. That is a game I expect to stay close. The guard minutes are largely in flux there, where they're running sort of that 5-guard rotation now that Lou Williams back and is taking a big chunk, and he's started to pull time away from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and some of the other guys there. But I still feel pretty confident in the usage and the time for Gallinari and Harris. And for a lot of the year, you were getting, Harris at 7, which was really good, and Gallinari at 6, which was really good. And I was hammering those prices in decent matchups for quite some time. I think, at this point, their prices have come pretty close to similar, and especially playing down with the 4, which I like a little more, and I like a little more in this matchup. I like Tobias Harris a lot today. And again, they both have I'm rounding a little bit here, but they both basically have like a 35-point game and a 50-point game in their previous tilts with the Suns. So they're just both a little too cheap. Harris being my preference there. Would also prefer him to mind blank on who else someone had just Montrezl Harrell. I like Montrez just fine. But when I do expect Boban to take part of the rotation and not necessarily all of it, enough of a slight downturn that I slightly prefer Tobias to him, but you could certainly Montrez. And one other guy who I've looked at a lot today, who I I haven't heard spoken about as much as I think he should be would be Tim Hardaway Jr. He's just too cheap. Like, he has shot like shit for several games in a row, and the Knicks have gotten blown out, so you've had a couple games where the minutes were really limited, but 4 for 18, 5 for 13, managed to go back to 7 for 12 in the last game. Like, he is a guy when the price was up to 66, 7,000. That was tough. Now in a matchup against the Lakers, a team that gives up a fair bit of production to the 2 and the 3, to the wings. Those are the guys I want to take there. I like Kevin Knox a lot, but I probably like Tim Hardaway even more at what I expect to be lower ownership. It's been a little while since he's shown you super ceiling game, but you can get 40, 45 out of him. And this is certainly as likely a spot as any to see it in. So they're coming off a series of pretty rough matchups with the Bucks and the Jazz and the Nuggets in the last game. This should be a bit of a fresh air, and I think he'll go very under the radar. So I like Tim Hardaway Jr. a lot.
Yeah, his price is down a pretty noteworthy amount. He gets a B and a B from Osmo in points and value, so there is some logic there in going to Hardaway.
Yeah, as an overall ranking, I think I had him as a B in cash and an A in tournaments. So I'm a fan.
Cool Eater asking in the chat, how do you feel about Joe Ingles? Joe Ingles is a guy who's popped up in my projections. I had him a lot more the other night. He actually had a decent day, other than the fact he went 0 for 5, but he still put up 22 fantasy points despite not doing anything of note on the scoring side. Pretty cushy matchup for Ingles. We've talked about Donovan Mitchell before. How are you feeling about Ingles' prospects versus the Cavs?
I don't hate them. Again, the pace there is dreadful. And again, the DK price I like a little bit more. FanDuel, I really like reserving a spot for Brandon Ingram at this point. But I think it's fine. I'm not a giant fan, but yeah, I'm thoroughly ambivalent on Joe Ingles tonight. You would have preferred to have Rubio out, in which he's just a little more involved in the offense, does what we'll generally call some supplemental ball handling. But certainly seeing some number of these guys, have very solid games against the Cavs wouldn't surprise me. So I would probably prefer to play him over either of the fours, over Crowder or Favors, but probably have him behind Donovan Mitchell and Rubio himself, by the way. If Rubio's out there playing, again, I expect him to start. I expect him to be unencumbered. I always enjoy taking guys in tournaments in that position where they're just not as owned as they should be.
Yobagoya asking, which is a fine reference to the league, I believe. Nice. Please, someone tell me that somebody besides me likes Lillard. What do you think about Dame Lillard tonight? His price still at a pretty reasonable range, but maybe not the best matchup versus the Thunder.
Yeah, he's sitting in 2 of the 3, again, matchups I'm toying with all day for tournaments. I like him quite a bit. I would rather play Lillard than Westbrook at their respective prices on every site. So, pretty big fan of Lillard. And again, I'm a bigger fan of sort of the mid-range guys. He is the most expensive guy, or tied with Booker in a lot of lineups that I'm looking at. So, no, I like Lillard quite a bit. I think it's a good spot for him. I'm projected for about 45, but he's always a guy who has a big ceiling on top of that. So I like Lillard quite a bit. So no, I'm right with you there. So Jabari Parker expected to be back in the rotation as the backup power forward on Friday. So again, this will go a little more traditionally, I think, than we necessarily expected there. But I want to talk about the Bulls for one more second, simply to mention that this is a lot of shots up to grab. Like, I like Lauri Markkanen, I think, more than a lot of people do. I would probably rank my Bulls I want to play, ignoring the punt potential of Chandler Hutchinson, probably Markkanen, then Chris Dunn, then Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine gets the most difficult of the defensive matchups, and he has struggled against Oladipo in the past. Oladipo himself, by the way, also not out of play. You wanted Miles Turner out, slightly greater alpha chance for him there, good rapport with Sabonis, etc. But he has a 55 to 60 fantasy point game against these Bulls this year. I think in the only one of the 2 games he did play. He's certainly not out of play, but Markkanen with the choicest of the matchups. I always have these things I want to look and try to figure out why, because there's always times that stat and video and production don't match up. So I don't understand why power forwards against the Pacers have been in a really good spot this year. They've scored very well, including Markkanen in one of his previous games, when Thad has looked like he's playing really good defense to me every time I watch him. Now, I don't watch a lot of Pacers basketball, so that's just something in the back of my head I have to check, but setting aside my inclination and just looking at the data, power forwards have done extremely well against this Pacers team this year. And, Markkanen's price hovering around 6,500, the ownership really isn't going to be there. And, Holiday was taking a really significant number of shots. He was basically chucker number one on this team. Chandler Hutchinson is not going to take nearly that many shots. They have to be distributed somewhere. That alone provides enough upside for a guy like Lauri Markkanen, so I would have some interest there. Someone asked in chat, THJ or Hart. That would be certainly THJ in tournaments for me. You could argue for Hart in cash. That would be very close. But I would certainly run THJ in my first tournament lineup.
Just real fast on Lillard, too. One thing which I think is worth noting, because I did watch that game, just because I watched everything. But Lillard was sick that game. He wasn't on the injury report as being sick, but I think a lot of people may be a little biased against him because as chalk, he did kind of disappoint the other night. So the hope is that he'll be closer to full health today, but I just wanted to point that out fast because box score watching is a thing, so then you got to pay attention sometime.
Yeah, which is, again, you need to filter it with something. Also, back-to-backs for the day, if it moves you on any of these players. The Cavs play again. No one played yesterday, again, which was nice. Teams played yesterday, but no one who played yesterday is playing today. But of the teams who played today, the Cavs and the Mavs, the Grizzlies and the Bucks, the Trailblazers, and the Jazz play again tomorrow. So maybe a bit of a front end of back-to-backs, usually not as concerning. But maybe if you're, thinking that either the Bucks or the Jazz, for example, really push the shit in on the Hawks or the Cavs, maybe they get rested a minute or two earlier than they would be if they were otherwise unencumbered by a game tomorrow evening.
Nixon in the premium Slack asking, do you like Lillard over Booker on DK?
I like Lillard over Booker on DK. I would, in my first tournament lineup, probably try to play other. I do like having some exposure to the Suns here. It seems a dangerous team to fade in its entirety, so my first inclination would be to, and I think this is what I've done, play, for example, Lillard and Ayton, who I like a lot, or Lillard and Warren, to sort of cover yourself there. But in general, if I'm building one tournament lineup, I probably play Lillard. If I build one cash lineup, it'd be very close for me. I'd have them with roughly the same degree of consistency and same projection. So that'd be close for me. But yeah, my inclination would be to hope you get a bit more of a, non-Booker game. And it isn't the best spot for him. The pace is lovely, but they have a reasonable bevy of defenders to throw at him. I also don't think DeAnthony Melton at 3,700 in DK is out of play here. He started to bounce back into seeing more significant minutes, and again, in a world without decent value, $3,700 DeAnthony Melton in a good matchup, who we expect to see maybe 28 minutes, passable.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. He pops out pretty well on my projections too, and Osimo has him as being a decent value tonight as well. Let's do it's the midway point of the show, so let's go through some of the top owned guys and do a little pregame Daddy likes. Top 5 guys on DK. First up on the list, Karl Anthony Towns. We talked about 23%. How does Daddy feel about it?
He's our chalkiest guy on the slate.
He is currently, yep.
Yeah. I would be disinclined towards playing him in my first lineup. It's 23% is not a huge number, although again we are dealing with 10-game slate as opposed to 3-game slate, so not certainly not apples and apples comparing day to day here. I think that number is just fine. I don't have any issue with someone playing no Karl Anthony Towns or playing 100% Karl Anthony Towns. He is approximately appropriately tagged there. So I don't really have a strong take there. It is an environment which I think his super ceiling game is likely. I am thoroughly ambivalent. I could manufacture a take for the purpose of good TV, but I have no issue with someone having Towns. If I was building one lineup, I would not put Karl Anthony Towns in if he's the chalkiest player on the slate, just because I think there's a reasonable chance he gets outscored by Vooch or Gasol, or gets scored roughly proportionately to by Turner or Ayton or Whiteside. So I would be disinclined to paying, 5 digits for Towns in my first lineup. So I guess Daddy slightly doesn't like, but clearly I'm about as ambivalent as a person could be. I could not be more wishy-washy.
Also, if you want to play along with us at home, use the promo code live before lock on Osmo.com to get all these rankings and projections for free. All the data that we discuss on all these shows is available right at your fingertips. So go use that promo code live before lock now. Guy you just mentioned is number 2 on the list, DeAndre Ayton, 7,800 is projected for 23% ownership as well.
Oh, okay. So yeah, sitting right in there in the same level. That's fine. Again, I would say the upside is obviously a little smaller, but you're saving, I think, $2,100 if I'm remembering that right off the top of my head. Yep. So, yeah, fine. That's about right. Daddy is thus far unengorged and unaroused by the options. Meh.
How about this one? JaVale McGee is projected for 22% ownership, and he is a deep discount at 5,200.
Yeah, 52 feels good against the Knicks there, who will run out some substandard defensive center against him. Some combination of 1, 2, nay, 3 probably substandard centers against him. Yeah, 5,200 is simply too cheap. He's 66 or whatever he ends up being on FanDuel, and that's not entirely out of play because of steal block, fun upside stuff he can do, and that game's obviously going to have a ticket on it. So I'll go with Daddy likes that. I'm slightly more inclined of when in doubt I'll take the cheap guys. So yeah, JaVale, Daddy likes. I'm a big fan of that. Another guy I want to mention, by the way, I don't know if you were going to get to him. I doubt he's in the top 5. But Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm a huge fan of in tournaments, especially when the slates get this big. He just has slate-breaking upside every day he steps on the court. He also has pitiful failure, but when his price is all the way down at 5,600, he was down at 5,000 on DK the other day when I just couldn't get enough. He can just hit 40 or 50 so many different ways. I really like the matchup with Brooklyn, obviously. So, just Jaren Jackson Jr. still a guy I would want to certainly be on top of the field on. I imagine the field is only sitting at, I'll say 14% or something on Jaren Jackson Jr., so I'd probably want
to... that, 7% projected.
Yeah, that's exceptional. I love that. At that price, it's not... I mean, he routinely mauls this price. Yeah. There's I'm a fan of Jaren Jackson Jr. at reduced numbers. And Yahoo. FanDuel, he's a little more appropriately expensive. I think he's 18 on Yahoo. That's a really nice number for him there as well. Another guy, while I'm looking at my Yahoo placeholder there, Mo Harkless, only 13 on Yahoo. He's starting to get more time, a guy who produces in a number of ways. I think he's 49 on FanDuel. That's a little bit tough. But 42 on DK, I think it is, and 13 on Yahoo. Mo Harkless, another guy I'd have exposure to.
And I'm with you, by the way, on Jackson. He's somebody who pops up for me, too, and I think the matchup fits well. And, of course, if you are not playing Jackson, JaMychal Green, always a viable pivot to him who projects pretty well.
It's just just an upset thing. And I think, someone can check me on this, but I'm pretty sure Jackson dropped a hammer, as did most of the Grizzlies in that aforementioned double overtime game. But he had 50 and 40-something minutes, which is not at all surprising. But he's just cheap enough where I'm a big fan of it.
We'll get back to the top 5, but real fast, some news just broke. Derrick Rose officially ruled out. Does that change anything for you, Eddie?
I'm a pretty big fan of Okogie still. He lost some time in that last matchup due to is probably now my favorite singular punt on FanDuel as of this writing. Now I'm a fan of playing 2 more expensive shooting guards. So again, the lineups that I have in front of me don't have Okogie in them, but $3,800 makes a lot of sense for a guy who does carry an upside. The ownership will be down if that's something that concerns you, but he can just pick up steals and blocks, and at this point should play 30 minutes. In that last game, I thought he might see all the way up towards like 36 or 37. He got in foul trouble and lost most of his shift. That kept him in the low 20s as opposed to getting what would have been about 30. But I still think he plays about 30 minutes today in a fine matchup. I mean, he's a guy who carries some upside with him. So I still like some Okogie, especially on FanDuel. Certainly in play if you're building a lot of tournament lineups on DK, where he's, I think, 3,900. But, it's basically some shine for Okogie, and then it's a boost for Towns. Like, if you were playing Karl-Anthony Towns, you definitely wanted Derrick Rose out. So, more of a fan of Karl-Anthony Towns than I was 2 minutes ago.
Yep, I agree. I was assuming Rose was out, so that definitely has impacted my Town stance on the night. But yeah, I would agree strongly with you there. Brandon Ingram, number 4 on the ownership list, 21% ownership. How's Daddy feel about that?
I like it. I don't think Kuzma plays. Just being my gut there, I think they believe they can handle that game either way. They'll give him some time. That's just my guess. But he He missed shoot-around, so I don't think Kuzma plays today, and that makes, especially on FanDuel, Lakers are just, as a team, collectively too cheap. Lonzo and Ingram are a couple of the first guys I really want to get into my lineup there, especially at the positions they occupy. So no issue with you paying, I think it's 7,700 on DK for Lonzo, or 68 for Ingram is still exceptional. And they're both way the hell too cheap on Yahoo as well. So, Brandon Ingram is appropriately chalky. Daddy likes. I'd have no issue getting on top of that. I think there's some uncertainty as to whether Kuzma plays. I'm 60-40 that he sits, and because of that, I'm a big fan of Ingram because he's kind of safe regardless, and in a pretty monstrous spot if Kuzma sits out. And that also leads me to a fair amount of appeal for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And Lance Stevenson. Lance, the more difficult to trust tournament-y option there, but obviously priced way the hell down depending what site you look at. And KCP, started the second half last time. Sans Kuzma played 30 whatever the hell minutes, so he just ends up being too cheap. But yeah, like a lot of Lakers, and I would be happy to be over that Ingram number.
Yeah, KCP is a guy who I wanted to touch on too. He's been shooting the lights out, literally just shooting a ton, not necessarily with a ton of success, but his usage rate has really gone up the last few games. I don't know what he's playing for exactly, maybe to get traded out of town.
He's somebody who we lambasted as useless at the beginning of the year too. Just useless.
True.
Was having these 17-minute 1 rebound shifts, just so terrible. But at this point, there's just it's fine even if Kuzma is in, but if Kuzma is out, he's literally a very, very strong play. Still, there is a floor there that can obviously be achieved, but that's just a ton of minutes at that price, and there's just a lot of usage to go around, and it's got to fall on Lonzo and Ingram and KCP. I mean, you don't really run the offense through JaVale McGee, so these guys have to pick up some slack, and just especially FanDuel and Yahoo, they're just too cheap for what you'd expect in what's a superlative matchup.
Speaking of some slack, bouncing back to the premium slack for some questions. What a transition. What a pro on a Friday. With Jabari back, do you like James Johnson or Jabari? Rinpack is asking.
Yeah, I left Jabari in my rankings because this is what I expected to happen. I think he's 45 on FanDuel. That's a bit rich. I don't think they want to give him a ton of time. I think they actually trend up extra for marketing. So I'll go with 13 minutes for Jabari Parker. So he is out of play on FanDuel for me. And on the very hedging edges of a play on DK. So I will go the other way.
Going through the Slack now. Vonleh or Tatum for a FanDuel GPP? Or actually, and overall thoughts on Vonleh for J. Kelly 13?
Yeah, obviously a guy that has been tough to stamp down. Looking at the Knicks in their entirety, with the potential return of Mitchell Robinson tonight, Fizdale's attitude, demeanor, and comments, lead you to believe he doesn't know exactly who he's going to screw and how or when, but he's going to try to find time for all 3 centers, and that includes playing some of them next to each other at certain times. So the way this relates to Vonleh is that it completely expurgates any shot he had of playing minutes at the 5. That basically will not happen now with 3 other centers on the roster they're trying to get minutes to. And in theory, might even lose a couple of minutes at the 4. I kind of doubt we see that straight out. But we had seen lineups in the past where they ran Mitchell Robinson out there next to Enes Kanter for a few minutes, and so on. So I like Vonleh as a player. He's someone I've been talking up since I think before just about anybody else, and he's smashed some lineups for us in the past, but he's the most expensive Nick at this point. You're paying more for him than Knox. It's hard to like him as much at this price when I feel he's a little bit threatened and his minutes are less secure than, say, Knox as an immediate parallel. So I like Vonleh just fine in tournaments. Can end up being just a walking double-double. Another exceptional rebounder on this team that doesn't defend very well, but rebounds exceptionally well. But is just a tournament play for me and would rank under Jaren Jackson Jr., for example. So not hugely on Vonleh.
Does JaVale McGee have any upside today for a DK GPP?
Yeah, he's got a ton of upside. He can play 25 minutes against the Knicks. He can get 40 in that time. That's enough upside. He's just 5,200 is just too inexpensive for him at this point, having entirely reclaimed his role and recovered from his pneumatic symptoms of whatever they were. So yes, there's certainly some upside there for him at 52. If you get Mitchell Robinson is out, there's upside for Enes Kanter at 55 and 51 and whatever the hell numbers he comes in at. One of his recent games, he had 35 fantasy points in 20 minutes. Like, that's certainly a possibility he can do as well, but I would certainly rather go with McGee.
And we also just got an ownership projections update, so real fast. These are the ones you should pay for, but I think it's noteworthy since we literally just talked about it. Ayton now the projected number 1 owned player on the slate, bumping down JaVale McGee. Towns coming in at 3rd, so that changed while we were talking.
Yep.
So,
and the Wolves will start Okogie at the 3 if anyone was concerned thusly.
Do you see Brad Stevens matching up Tice with Dallas more so that would give Jaylen Brown extra run?
Yeah, I left Tice in my. I understand what that person is saying. Actually, that does actually correlate. So that's.
I definitely did. I did the dog head tilt there.
Yeah, you did. I'm not surprised you did. I don't have you up right now. I can't see you, but I'm. That doesn't sound intuitive, but that is actually correct. That the more you get Tice, you will get a little more time out of Brown there. Yes, I think that is likely, and for that reason, I left Tice in my rankings. This big situation there is a little bit sticky. Maybe you get another Hayward game. Feels a little chasey, but has looked better. So I probably still prefer Hayward as my guy in that front court, slightly over, say, Tatum. But I like both those players quite a bit, and someone there should find a way to be productive without Kyrie and the minutes and usage that portends, and more importantly, with Morris out.
Got some questions here. What do you think about Gasol on Yahoo in particular?
I love him on Yahoo. $29 on Yahoo is just a really, really good price. Now, in fairness, all the non-town centers are really well priced there. I like Gobert at 33. I like Miles Turner at 30 quite a bit. I like, Whiteside was 25. I think Ayton was in like the high 20s. So it's just the reason why, I have no issue with anyone playing any Karl Anthony Towns, but you're just getting it does seem, I will say that it does seem very correct to play 2 centers in most of your lineups there, because of how advantageously many of them are priced. You have Gobert 33, Nurk 33, Ayton 32, Turner 30, Marc Gasol 29, Whiteside 25, Adams 25, DeAndre Jordan 24. So it's difficult to look at all these guys who you have projected in the vague area of 35 or 40 and spend twice as much for Towns who you have projected in the vague area of 50. I like Marc Gasol. I like Miles Turner. I like, of those guys most, I probably like Gasol, Turner, and Ayton at 29, 30, and 32 are all well too cheap. And in cash, I think you can do very well with something like Rudy Gobert and Marc Gasol, who collectively cost $13 more than Karl Anthony Towns, and you'd project for 84 as opposed to 51.
Rocky asking a more general question in the premium Slack. Is 4 people on the same team too much for a stack?
It's going to depend on the salaries and the positions of those players. For a stack is your statement. So if you had, say, Giannis and 4 Hawks, including one really, really cheap one, that could kind of work. So that's again, I think it's important to keep your head on a swivel. So that's going to change per team, per price, per site, per slate. So rather than sort of bullshit an answer, I'll decline to answer something quite that generic, but there are certainly times it would not be. So I would not look at 4 players on the same team and be like, oh, this is fucked. But certainly if they were all, medium to expensive, it would strike me as unlikely to be correct. Not impossible. And again, one of the situations in which that would work would be in a team with decently set rotations like the Bucks against a team like the Hawks, who frequently can give it up so sweet. Again, we had that Wizards game not that long ago where I strongly supported a stack, and of the 8 Wizards who played, 7 of them were good. So if you told me you had a lineup today that was Bledsoe, Brogdon, Lopez, and Middleton, and, Trae Young and another guy in the Hawks, no, I think that lineup could work. So, it is not de facto wrong.
Would you play, while we're talking about the Hawks situation, would you play any Alex Len in a GPP for some blowout minutes?
Sure. I mean, he's shown he's coming off decent game, a very good game, and a great game over his last 3 games. They've shown a willingness to play him alongside Dwayne Dedmon, which seems like it would be really difficult in some matchups, and it would be very difficult in this matchup against the Bucks. But they just did it against the Wizards, which is another matchup where they're running small guys out at the 4, and that would seem really unlikely to stick. And they did it a lot. So, hey, and it looked good. So maybe they like it and stick with it again. So. Again, I love centers tonight. It's going to change a little bit by position. I would probably rather run Dedmon, for who is even a few $100s less on some sites. I would probably rather run Brook Lopez than either of them, who's also priced very similarly to the other two on either site. But I don't have an issue if you have Len in a tournament lineup. So would I run some? Sure.
Let's see. Bryant or Markkanen for a DK GPP?
I'll play Lauri Markkanen. Largely an ownership thing there. I have them both projected very nicely. I mean, I like Thomas Bryant, and they're going to continue to load him up at center as long as Markieff is gone. When Markieff comes back, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. But Otto Porter doesn't really affect him for shit. They didn't even play Mahinmi again last game, so, I mean, it's his job. I have him projected for 38 minutes. So, cash, I think, is Bryant. But Markkanen I would put in my first tournament lineup over Bryant, assuming I had I think it's $500 to spare. That didn't matter.
For DK cash, would you go Bembry and Ayton or DJA? Who's
DJ Augustine?
Oh, there we go. That's not a fucking abbreviation. Don't just put Augustine, you bastard, Kevin Zoe. Augustine and Nurkic.
Put the oldest city in the United States. Do it in code. I think St. Augustine in Florida is the anyway. For cash, Augustine, Nurkic. What were the other two?
Bembry and Ayton.
Ayton is the only one of those 4 players I want to play in cash. Let me say that for the record. That being said, between those 2 options, I would play Augustine and Nurkic.
Thoughts on Aaron Gordon? He's a guy who popped up for me a little bit, and I was actually just forcing him into a lineup as we were talking for some reason, unrelated to Swish and Mart's question. But what do you think about Aaron Gordon's prospects tonight?
Reasonable in tournaments, a little better on FanDuel where, you're forced to play 2, although, again, I really like Tobias Harris. I really like Kevin Knox. There's other guys I would rather play over him. Obviously it's been more rare that he's hitting the super upside, so, again, very ambivalent. If you had Aaron Gordon in a lineup, it'd be like, hey, it's Aaron Gordon. I hope you get there, but just not a guy if you somehow drew the matrix of all the mathematical options and the ownership and how frequently he hits the relevant ceiling that I think I'm wanting a ton of, but it's Aaron Gordon, a guy who has, shown the ability to crush it from time to time.
Would you go Okogie or James Johnson on DK?
I'd play James Johnson at this point. Now, James Johnson 2 games ago saw differentiated minutes. He played 8 minutes in the first quarter and left due to illness. In the last game, did not play in the second quarter, and then the game blew out, so he didn't play in the fourth. Maybe he could have. In a close game, he is a monster. I mean, he is probably my favorite value play at this point. I probably like him more than Melton in the moment. It's really tough to say. Melton actually feels a little safer. My biggest issue is the fact that this Heat team is becoming a giant minutes. You have Wade back in, which doesn't help. You have Derek Jones Jr., who plays the 2, the 3, and the 4, and who has played well recently and was getting a lot of minutes from Dwayne Wade's absence. So now they're going to try to run out these 11 guys, and I have absolutely no idea how they're going to distribute the minutes. I can take some guesses at it, but they're going to give Olynyk time and Adebayo time, and of course Whiteside and DJJ plays some down at the 4, and it's tricky. So I think the most likely thing to happen here, I have James Johnson projected less than other people. I am at 21 minutes right now. There is a real chance he plays 28 minutes. Like that could very much happen, and he should absolutely smash against the Wizards in what's a great spot. So I like playing James Johnson. I will choose him in this particular query you've given to me. But I do think it's very likely that just because of a blowout or just because of, they're just sharing his minutes all the fuck over the place, he only plays the first and the third quarter. That wouldn't shock me. He is starting, which certainly was the first thing you wanted to see. But Wade being in, believe it or not, was really relevant for how much I like James Johnson. If Dwayne Wade had not been playing, because Dwayne Wade plays 25 minutes. Like, they don't mess with his minutes. All these other guys, James Johnson gets 17, James Johnson gets 28, he gets 20, he gets 25, bounces all the hell over the place. Wade plays like 23 to 27 minutes, which I don't know if that's a conversation he had with Spoelstra. He's like, I'm coming back for a year, just don't play me 9 minutes, don't embarrass me. And he went, okay. When you're ready to play, I'll play you like 25 minutes a night. Okay. So Wade's getting his time, and I think maybe Derek Jones Jr. and Olynyk take enough of James Johnson that he's in the 20-minute range. So I'm sticking with my 20-minute projection. That was a long answer, but that is my James Johnson response.
What are your thoughts on CJ McCollum for a GPP? Is his upside too limited?
It was nice that in the last game he actually got to run some point and spend more time on the court without Lillard, although I kind of doubt that sticks. Is his upside too limited? No, because, I mean, he's had his, I scored 32 points in a quarter thing happen, not that infrequently as in once every year. The question is, does it happen enough? Like, I would rather play Tim Hardaway Jr., because I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to give me 40 plus at least every month, if not every 3 weeks or so, and he's costing a little bit less, and I like the matchup a lot more, and I don't think the ownership is significantly greater. So I don't have an issue with playing CJ McCollum. Of course, there is an upside that could make you happy there, even without weird shenanigans like Lillard foul trouble or, Westbrook pulling out a pocket knife and stabbing Lillard or whatever the hell happens for McCollum to get there in some weird way. So no, of course there is an upside there. I wouldn't, he's not my first guy in at that shooting guard position, but I wouldn't argue hard against someone else who wanted to make that play.
Westbrook has been getting heavy with the taunting. He taunted Lance Stevenson the other day. He taunted doing the baby taunt race. A stabbing is very much in range for Westbrook with how he's been acting lately.
I don't because he is a weird guy, but seemingly a very genuine, actually a good person from what you've seen. It's very weird. Like you have Lance Stevenson weird, which is like if you went into Lance Stevenson's house at night and he was wearing a tinfoil hat and I don't know, chewing pumpkin rinds, whatever. I would not be surprised. He's just a weird goddamn dude. Russ is this very unique kind of weird. He's not just like everything up in the air. He's everything from he only grows 7 facial hairs. I don't know if you knew that. If you ever look at Russell Westbrook's face, he's got this weird Fu Manchu and just a sort of couple tufts of hair. That's all he grows. Looking at you and me, most people do this slovenly Geico caveman bullshit. He grows 9 facial hairs. What is that? He has normal hair on his head and the rest of his body and under his arms, so it's not some sort of, vitiligo-inspired, vitiligo is the wrong one, alopecia-inspired skin condition, but I don't know, just, Russ is a very, very peculiar dude, and apparently, honestly, a really nice guy and good to his family, but just gets on the basketball court and turns into Mussolini,
I do have to say the Lance Strum is my favorite celebration of the year. It's so casual in the way that people can always mock him for it. It's one of my favorite things in the NBA right now.
Basketball celebrations are the best. The older I've gotten and the worse at basketball I've gotten, and the more uniquely white I've gotten among the people I play basketball with, the more absolutely preposterous my 3-point celebrations have gotten. I have, in the last 2 months only, dropped into the Shawn Michaels DX one leg pose. I have I go into all the weird, and it's just you gotta have fun with it. So it's what makes basketball the sport on the come, if you will. It's the personalities. Yeah. Versus the fortunes of sports like baseball and football. So many of the players are so largely anonymous. I followed football really closely for 10 years, and I followed basketball closely for a bit longer still, but the details I know about the basketball players, and that has something to do with everything from just no helmets. You just actually recognize the people. Sure. But
you can see their faces.
Yeah, so that's a thing.
Middleton or Tobias for DK GPP. Will burn through these either-ors fast.
Tobias.
Brogdon and Warren or Knox and Rozier for a DK GPP.
I'll go Brogdon and Warren. It's close.
DK Cash, Hutchinson, Bryant, and Booker, or Okogie, Tatum, and Ayton?
Cash, Hutchinson, Bryant, and Booker.
Overall thoughts on Jaylen Brown?
Yeah, I like him. Again, 4,500, especially on FanDuel, is significantly too cheap. Yeah, I'm a fan of Jaylen Brown. Just in general, I think he's a reasonable. More so certainly on FanDuel where you can get away from the potential floor outcomes. But yeah, I like Jaylen Brown just fine. A little more inclined in tournaments to go after some of the bigs or to pay the nut on Rozier. But I would rather play Jaylen Brown than Marcus Smart. I'll put it that way.
Thoughts on TJ Warren overall?
Concerning with there still being enough usage to necessarily flow to him. But the FanDuel price especially advantageous at 6,200. Still just a little bit too cheap. I like him, and a big fan of him as a player. His improvement as a personal player over the last year is honestly remarkable. He could not shoot a lick when he came into the league, and all of a sudden is shooting incredibly well after several years in the league. So shout out to him for that accomplishment, among other things. But he's 6,200 for TJ Warren, and his number on Yahoo are all objectively just very good prices. So, I kind of like Booker more for the greater chance of hitting a super ceiling. But points per dollar, I have Warren a little bit ahead of Devin Booker, for example. I'd rather play Tobias Harris, but I like TJ Warren. He's too cheap.
Yeah, I actually firmly agree with you on that. FanDuel cash, Warren, Ingram, and Cat or Moutier, PG-13, and Ayton.
The first one easily. In cash, that's not incredibly close. Because the first one is 3 really good cash plays, and the second one included Moutier, and I stopped listening. So, yeah, for cash, I'm going to go with the first 3.
Booker or Dame, no show, buddy. Sorry, what? I guess he wants you to answer in the chat. Never mind, then fuck you, Duncan. You don't even need your question answered here. Ayton or Gasol, who would you go with?
At this point, I would go with Gasol. Just appears to be, half the ownership. And it's a few $100s more, obviously. But, I like Marc Gasol plenty in the spot. So between those two guys, one tournament lineup, I would play Marc Gasol over DeAndre Ayton.
Why is no one talking about Terry Rozier?
Because his price came up and he's going to be somewhat chonky. And again, I don't want to give the impression that Moutier is a fine tournament play. He just doesn't, at his current price, get into your cash lineup over any of those other guys. No, Terry Rozier is now priced at the point where he's still slightly underpriced, so he makes a strong cash play and makes a perfectly reasonable tournament play, but is going to be somewhere in the 15 to 20% owned range. Has an above average matchup with Mavs. Just one of those things where I don't have a ton to add. It's like people ask, why didn't you say anything about Kevin Durant yesterday? I didn't have anything to add. It was Kevin Durant, and I liked Clay and Draymond more for really specific reasons, so I talked about them. But it's Terry Rozier at that price. He's a fine play. You can put him in anything. I would have no objection. He's very good on Yahoo 17 still, which is, almost first man in there. So.
This is too late now, but any thoughts on Rodney Hood on FanDuel, just for prosperity?
I liked him. He was in my thing there for a while. Obviously just tournaments, but the ability to drop it makes a lot of sense. If I'd have had $500, I would have thrillingly played him over Chandler Hutchinson. Revenge, along with 5 other guys in this game. But he's $4,000 on FanDuel. So I think they want to play him 28, 29 minutes. Another rotation that's getting a little crowded with, of course, Tristan returning, but the acquisition of Pat McCaw, everything else going on with that team. His minute ceiling has come down a little bit, but 4,000 for a guy who can just randomly grab a couple steals and make 5 3-pointers and do his stuff, I would have been just fine with him in a tournament. So, he's the kind of guy I would much rather play in tournaments at that punt spot than, say, Chandler Hutchinson, because Hutchinson probably has a better chance of getting to 20 tonight, but Hood definitely has a better chance of getting to 30 or 40.
Speaking of Hutchinson and DK Cash.
It's fine. It's $3,000. I would try not to if I could instead get some. And again, that game hasn't started. The other shitty game started. I'm fine with it. That's $3,000. I'm not thrilled with it. I would rather James Johnson if you can get that money. If you're a couple hundred short of that, I would rather Melton. But if you're 700 short of that, then yeah, $3,000 is $3,000. Right now, I have him projected for 31.5 minutes and 19 fantasy points. Thoroughly unexciting.
Would you go Bam and Lonzo or Hardaway and Hayward for a DK single entry?
I'd go Hardaway and Hayward. I like all 4 of those players, by the way. But I'd go Hardaway and Hayward among those.
All right. That's everything in the premium Slack right now. So I guess if you want to play a terrible version of Daddy Likes, let's go for it.
It's going to be ugly, kids. Okay. Again, I believe we should have just the Jazz and the Cavs, unless they change the schedule up on me. So feel free to close the show now if you don't want some sad, largely irrelevant ownership.
While you pull up those, rank these 3 raw points, DK,
sure.
Gasol, Ayton, and Miles Turner.
Yeah. Raw points, I will have them Ayton, Gasol, Miles Turner. I think I have them all within 2 points. So it ends up being a largely ownership distinction for me. Shockingly, my buddy's lineup had nobody in this game. I say in jest, because most of your lineup should have nobody in this game. Hopefully there's some good
Speaking
leaks.
of, the one person in the premium Slack does have somebody from this game. One Straw Hat asking, does Daddy like having 15% Alec Burks when the field is at 3.3% on DK?
You've made a stand. Let it not be said that you went through this life without ever standing for anything. You've stood for Alec Burks as one of the many vengeful people in this game against the Jazz. Yeah, it's knock yourself out. Like, there is a real chance that nobody on the Cavs is good. Like, there's some 20-30% chance that this entire team is shit. Woo! Most owned player in this game clocks in at 4.3%. So, it's a smorgasbord of fantasy goodness.
And that Jazz Cavs stack wins all the money. We're gonna feel awfully silly.
It happens like twice a year, and it's great. You get an overtime or just something weird happens, and you're like, wow, I can't believe it. But looks like, Memphis and Utah took it down. Like, it happens once a year. So do I like it? No, I would not want 15% Alec Burks against the Jazz. There's a reason the field only has 3.3%. That being said, good luck to you. It's certainly not an unreasonable stand. Like, it's at a point where 3.3%, yeah, he's probably appropriately priced / owned versus the upside. He's going to be thoroughly disappointing 75% of the time, tolerable 20% of the time, and pretty damn exciting 5% of the time, and I hope you get there. So I don't think it's an unreasonable place to be, but I'm not like, yes, on my Alec Burks shares. Joe Ingles coming in at number 1, 4.28%. Number 2, Ricky Rubio, 4%. Daddy likes that, obviously. I think that's Ricky Rubio, 4% against the Cavs. Not crazy for him to get some point assist double-double and do something kind of interesting there. Donovan Mitchell, 3.47%. Again, don't like that much. With Rubio back in, Alec Burks, 3.47%. Dante Exum, 2.93%. Jae Crowder, Daddy hates the Dante Exum shares. He's going to play 17 minutes against a really slow Cavs team. I guess you can hope for the blowout. If you have no one else, you still got a shot there. Jae Crowder, 2.6%. Rudy Gobert, 2.25%. All right, Daddy likes that. Like, the matchup with Tristan isn't exceptional. They both limit each other a fair amount, and Tristan a competent enough rebounder that it's not a super smash spot for Gobert. But that being said, 2.2% is about right. Again, center is a wonderland tonight. Tristan himself, 2.21, still a little more than I'd like to see, especially in this matchup. Colin Sexton, 2.1. Rodney Hood, 1.57. Larry Nance, 1.42. Derek Favors, 1.33. Kyle Korver, 1.29. Chetty Osman, 1.22. Jordan Clarkson, 1 on the nose. Then it gets real interesting. Hopefully one of these guys played themselves, or we could have the first utter failure of the year here. I'm going to count J.R. Smith, who I believe is technically a member of the team. So it is not a failure. So we will call that a you played yourself. But it's close. Pat McCall, 0.05. Jalen Jones, 0.05. Tabo, 0.02. Royce, 0.02. Channing Frye, 0.02. Howell Neto, 0.01. J.R. Smith, 0.01. Congratulations, you played yourself. But after that Jerem Boston game, oh, never mind. We do have an actual out. Matthew Dellavedova, 0.01. Actually not active this evening. So you actually completely played yourself. But it was close for a second.
Interesting lineups. Somebody in the YouTube chat, Dustin, noting in the YouTube chat, it's Colin Sexton's birthday with no Dellavedova. Does that make you like Colin Sexton? One of your noted favorites, Colin Sexton.
It's fine. He's young. I'm not trashing the guy personally. Like, he's a baby. Like, he needs some time.
You trashed him personally. You called him all sorts of MFers and all. You were slagging his entire family, his bloodline. It was really over the top.
I don't think I've called anyone an MFer in like 20 years. I am like permanently. I am everyone's best self when they are really high on weed and well fed. And when I just don't like fighting with. Life is tough enough. Man, is there so much manufactured conflict in this world, especially in the DFS space. But in most workspaces and family and stuff, like, I avoid fighting with people unless I absolutely have to, because I don't get anything out of it. Like, there's, a couple thousand people watch these shows. I don't know what number we got to tonight. Did we clear? I don't know. Obviously, it's going to have come down now, but hopefully we're in the 1600s again.
We're in the hunt. We're in the 1400s, I think.
All right, solid. There's always, like, 4 people a day or 4 people a week who are like, Ed, you're a fucking moron. I'm like, all right, fair. Like, what do I get from coming back at that guy? Life is just way the hell too short. So, Colin Sexton doesn't do a lot but score, which isn't ideal for a point guard. # analysis. But, He's fine. You know, like when the price is light and other guys were injured, I'd like him. But yeah, against the Jazz with the team becoming healthy and McCollum in town and the minutes reduced and he's not insane at 2% as a tournament play. Could he shoot 11 for 14 from the field and get 45 fantasy points? Sure. I don't think it's likely.
Here's one last question, then we'll close it up officially for the work week. Is there a playable 3K minimum guy for a DK GPP besides Hutchinson today?
I had my answer all set, and then you said besides Hutchinson, and now I have to
also
look.
Maybe a related tangent, because people in the YouTube chat were talking about him a lot, and K-Shep Killicam in the chat, the Slack chat right now, who's pretty sharp, is asking, what is Beasley being back due to the rotation?
I can't believe I didn't think to talk about Beasles. I was so excited. I have a note here, and just somehow it didn't come up. Beasley would be my answer. Like, you need Kuzma to be out, but LeBron's not there, and he was, designed to be the backup power forward on this team. And if both those dudes are out, it's easily Beasley. I think they'd like to, show him a good time and let him, get some stats under his belt against the Knicks. He's had I believe 2 personal tragedies this year. I don't mean to be speaking in such an amused tone while discussing such a thing, but he's back and he reported and he's active. And if the Kuz is not playing, I'd love Beasles. So yeah, that absolutely would be my next guy. I'd be shocked if he randomly played 25 minutes, but I think there's a chance he comes back and plays 15 minutes. And anyone who's been playing Beasley for years from his various stuff from the Bucks and the Knicks and all the other teams, it's a revenge against the Knicks for Beasley. So Beasley is. I will look at the other 3K guys, which feels, I'm not going to lie, like a waste of time, but I'm going to do it. But
Beasley, I feel like last year, too, when he was on the Knicks, I feel like his revenge games were particularly potent. He was also getting a ton of usage and had a real role, but...
Troy Daniels would be my next guy. I'd still have him behind Beasles at the moment. Oh, God. It's scary here. Hold me and tell me it's going to be okay. The 3Ks, it's a dangerous place to tread. It's scary down here.
Legalizing the premium Slack, how did the revenge narrative work out last night? It actually worked out very well for half of that equation, and the guy who was at home...
really a quarter of that equation. In just that game, you in theory had Rudy K, Jakob Poeltl, Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green, and DeMar DeRozan. So 1/5 of those guys were vengeful. And
well, that's the thing, though. I feel like you have to have a certain personality type, and that's where I think this is not a data point, but you need to know the guys. I was actually talking about this on one of our calls today about like there are certain guys who you could go back and forth with, like you say, like you have a matchup with Kemba Walker and Damian Lillard, and the game gets out of hand. Those guys are going to shoot each time they get the ball because that's their DNA. Like Kawhi isn't that necessarily that kind of player who's going to take over like that. Whereas DeRozan, you could tell, was going after every loose ball, like diving, looking for open guys. Like he went out of his way. I think revenge narratives are overrated, but I think certain players are legitimately spiteful human beings, and that little bit of motivation can be an edge, especially for peripherals.
I think it is one of those things that absolutely exists, and absolutely none of us have any idea what the fuck to do with it.
Yes,
it's sort of where I come down with it. Like it's a thing. It's like BVP. People who say like BVP doesn't exist. You're wrong. BVP exists. Saying it is an incredibly noisy stat that is largely covered by other statistics and is more frequently misrepresentative than helpful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it exists. If you've played sports for X years, if you've played baseball or basketball, there's just guys you are bad against, and that exists. It's just other ways to quantify it may well be better. So. Is, revenge a thing? Sure. Are we ever going to be able to turn that into, this is a guy who gets plus 7% production when vengeful, whereas this guy, gets the squirts in his shorts when he's vengeful and he underperforms, and it's like, I don't know if there's much we can do with it, but yeah, I would agree with you. There's certainly some people who get their spite on.
Yeah, I think Daryl Morey said before, like everybody who got traded from the Rockets always comes back hard because those guys were sad to be leaving Houston and that scene they have there. And I remember that particularly because Corey Brewer last year had random outlier games every time he played the Rockets. Yeah. And for some reason, he wasn't getting big rotation minutes, but he found a way into that rotation and he made the most of it. So there's no way to know these things. Obviously, like people in the Slack chat talking about Danny Green. Like Danny Green was hugging Pop and looking sad and emotional.
So was Kawhi. Kawhi walked up and gave him a hug. at the conclusion of that game. Kawhi gave Pop a big hug, and like Pop felt bad they were booing him and the whole thing. Like that's a tough spot. And again, that's a manufactured conflict thing. Like that's just people like, oh, we're gonna make it a thing, and Kawhi hates Pop and Pop hates Kawhi, and like people are like, Pop said he wasn't a leader. What Pop said was there's a lot of different types of leaders, and you have guys who are rah Russell Westbrook leaders, and then you have guys who go in there and they're leaders by being the first guy in the gym and the last guy out of the gym and leading by example, and Kawhi was more of the second type of guy. But somehow that got construed into him saying, like, yeah, Kawhi's shit, he isn't leading anything, which isn't at all what happened, and everyone wants to make a huge thing. And I liked Kawhi more than DeRozan last night, but I was perfectly fine to just let that game go in its entirety, which outside of DeRozan and some of the Toronto punts we talked about would have been the better way to go. Storm and Norman Powell got there. That was nice.
Yeah, yes, fucking Norman Powell. That was one guy who was not on my radar at all, and was really, I've been 2 players away from having the correct lineup, like the top perfect lineup for several times in last week, and which is a good feeling, but also a terrible feeling at once.
Yeah.
And also was putting up 360 or 370 on DK and finishing in the top 300 only. It's a bit of a downer.
Yeah, no, there's it's all relative.
Yeah, DFS, it's a moving target, but that's why we're here for you every day. So we appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. If you're hanging out right now, throw us a like real fast before you leave. It'll take you literally 0.5 seconds, and it helps us out quite a bit. It's just being a good human on YouTube and on the internet ecosystem. So throw us that like video or that like on the video right now. And also use the promo code live before lock on awesemo.com. Obviously, this slate is now, this main slate is behind us. We still have the night slate going on. So if you want to get some ownership projections and rankings for that, get on board there. We have Eddie's rankings. We have Josh Engelman's projections. We have Awesemo's rankings and the ownership projections. And the ownership projections in particular are very key for night slates. So go check that out now. Promo code live before lock will get you 1 week free. And any parting words, Eddie, before we wrap up this business week, the first business week of 2019?
Yeah, no, I'll be back Saturday and Sunday. I think I'm gonna do this by myself, Penny Royalty style. But I will. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you again on Monday, I think, or maybe that's Josh. But I'll see you on the flip side.
I get you on Tuesday, but I'll be back tomorrow doing NFL with Josh. So we got shit going on.
All right. Shows. Well, y'all have a good weekend and good luck with your playoff football.
Bye, guys. Have a good one.
Oh, and I have to end the show, right? Okay.
You do have to end the show. Before we go on tirades about everybody.
Before we go on tirades, I can't believe that guy we work with. He smells like mung beans. It's